What's up, YouTube? Now, there seems to be a new trend of Karenism going around. I'm not sure what white supremacist website or comment thread they're getting this from, but check this out.
Stop touching me.
Man,
call the
police.
police.
Come on.
Call the police.
Come on.
I'm not leaving. Stop it.
Ma'am,
Call the police. You can call the police. Excuse me.
it's a slippery sword.
Stop. Call the police right now. Yeah, your people sold you into slavery.
You know what?
What?
You know what? Let me tell you, dumb.
Please.
You know why they sold us into slavery?
Why?
Because the dumb start marrying the slaves so they can have a straight.
Were you there? I don't think we've been lied to about all our history.
This is the third video where I've heard white Karens telling black people that Africans sold other Africans into slavery. When a person of color merely asks them to wear a mask or asks Karen to stop being belligerent or obnoxious while chasing clout in a grocery store somewhere in America. Well, let's talk about that, shall we?
I'm calling the police now!
If you thought 2020 was bad, 2021 just said, hold my beer.
Now, unfortunately, black people, it's true. Africans did sell other Africans into slavery. I mean, slavery was practiced by every single race in human history, actually, especially the Romans. You saw the movie Gladiator, right? Yeah. Who do you think the gladiators were? They were enslaved people, either sold to the empire out of desperation or captured in battle, then fed to the lions or made to engage in blood sport to satisfy and quench the unending lust for blood and violence by the white Roman population who just couldn't get enough. Yes, white people sold other white people into slavery for the purposes of watching them get mutilated, disemboweled, beheaded, or maybe even the crowd favorite when they unleashed the lions to eat them alive, while cheering crowds of white Romans salivated at the sight of intestine and bone and sinew spread across the ground of the atrium. As the lions and tigers separated flesh from bone, and the crowd leaned forward to get a better look, to see the moment when life actually left the gladiator in a celebrated gore. And in many cases, they were sexually aroused by the sight. Just saying. The Vikings. Not often, but sometimes bought slaves from other white conquered provinces. Seldom, because for the most part, they enjoyed killing everything they couldn't rape. And having sex with the dead things was sometimes a practice. Yeah, when their bloodlust became no longer quenched by merely raping a soft white body and then killing it, even that gruesome act became, So raping the dead thing again after murdering it became a fad for a while. But yes, even they had slaves, white slaves, sold and or stolen, women for sex and men for working to the death, and sometimes for sex too. Yeah. Now, the Native Americans, now here's an interesting one, guys. Native Americans kept something like slaves, right? We're talking about degrees here, but yes, they kept slaves of other Native Americans. Tribe defeats tribe. Tribe either assimilates defeated tribe or enslaves them, or both. Now, the Mongols, the Indians, the Persians, and yes, the Africans. All of this is just to say the poor black cashier or attendant that has to endure the humiliation and the shame of hearing a white person tell them that their ancestors sold them into slavery, that it wasn't unique or even new, people. Races have been selling their own races into slavery for the last 10,000 years before Europeans even showed up on the shores of Africa. But, and here's the kicker, I can tell you that the white Karen who decided to tell you that in 2021 is doing it because they get off on humiliating you and shaming you. They say that because they think somehow the person selling the slave is now worse than the person who actually bought and used and castrated and raped the slave.
Yeah, your people sold you into slavery. What?
It helps them sleep at night because their false sense of superiority needs to be constantly replenished because it's false. And they know it. And their ego would shatter if they allowed themselves to see themselves as they actually are. As humans like you and I, disgusting, perverted, selfish, and unredeemable flesh gone amok, just like their ancestors before them. Now, I happen to know that all humans are disgusting. You see, the only difference is the circumstance you put us in, and the social bonds and contracts that shape our morality of the moment, and only as far as it is convenient. That's it. Normal, regular, and decent white people of YouTube, what you're about to hear next doesn't condemn you. It's not a condemnation of your race. That's stupid. On the other hand, if you think it's okay to say this to a black person, as if you have any right to tell a descendant of slaves your ancestors stole about how bad their ancestors were, bold-faced and without humility, you personally may as well be a slave owner yourself, because it's obvious that you said that simply as a way to cause as much pain as possible, to put that nigger in their place, while simultaneously detaching yourself from any responsibility left to you by your super predator ancestors to do your part now to make this a better place than how they left it. So yeah, black people, understand what it means when a white person tells you that your ancestors sold you into slavery. You should laugh. Because when Africans enslaved their tribal enemies, they let them marry. And keep their religion. And even respected their gods. When Africans enslaved the tribal enemies, they let the mothers keep their babies. And in many cases, the babies were born free to become members of the new society or were allowed to emancipate themselves over time or any number of ways. When Africans enslaved their tribal enemies, they still saw them as humans and allowed the slaves to keep their humanity. Like nearly all instances of slavery before in the history of Earth. The Egyptians, for instance, when they enslaved the Jews were still allowed to worship Yahweh and even had days deemed religious days, respected by the enslavers who considered themselves gods. And no, Africans aren't some superhuman, benevolent beings on Earth. Every person or every group or every culture that I mentioned before, including white Europeans, Native Americans, Black, Persians, Mongols, everybody who did this thing of slavery and who were all horrible, all of us humans, had one thing in common when they did it, was that they saw the person in front of them as a human being. Even those who raped, killed, and pillaged knew that their enemies were human and let them die without stamping out names from the history book. When Africans were selling their tribal enemies into slavery, they could not have imagined that they were selling them to such monsters that would pack them like sardines at the bottom of boats by the thousands as they urinated and defecated on themselves, and as the stench would rise up through the floorboards while the captain would eat his dinner. And these nasty people still wouldn't do anything about it. There was no way that Africans knew they were selling their tribal enemies into a slavery that meant babies would be ripped from their mothers while they were still suckling at the breast for sustenance. Or that these monsters would not only separate the families, but take their names and even their religions away from them, so they had no more gods to pray to. There was no way to know that they were selling their tribal enemies into people who would feed their crying babies to alligators and use them as bait, or would hang them from trees and invite their friends and white children to have a picnic around the still smoldering bodies after burning them, which of course was after castrating them, which of course was after hanging them, while they ate sandwiches at the park and their children watched the horror. You see, Africans didn't know that the absolute most violent, sadistic, disgusting, and worst purveyors of physical and psychological violence in the history of Earth, except maybe Rome, was the people who showed up to their shores calling themselves Christians. What the Africans thought they were selling their enemies into was slavery, yes, and it's bad enough. But as we found out, what they considered slavery, simple subjugation of a conquered enemy, was not the slavery that you, Karen, praise and congratulate when you say that.
Yeah, your people sold you into slavery.
To a black person. If you told those Africans that it was even possible for human beings to be so low and disgusting as you, and on such a grand scale as that, they wouldn't even believe it was possible. They were naive. So, good and decent people of all colors, when you see or hear somebody saying that to a black person, and black people, when someone says that to you, you should laugh, because what they're saying is, my ancestors were so gross that they showed up to a country, to a land of normal human beings and convinced them that they too were normal human beings when they were not. And when they say, I'm just saying the truth, I'm just telling the truth, you say, that is also true. Another thing that is also true is that their ancestors that showed up under the banner of Christianity and left under the banner of vulgarity and savagery were a singularity in the human existence. There was never anything as violent and as cursed and as gross and as long-lasting as they were in the history of human existence, before them or after them. Doesn't matter the race. All races, none have been worse in their enslavement of others. None have gone as far and been as degraded as them. I'm just saying the truth. Find where I'm wrong. So you laugh when they tell you that black man, black woman, when they tell you that as a way to absolve themselves from responsibility of trying to make this place better from when their super predator ancestors left it. And they try to put the blame on you. Let them know that all races have sold each other and themselves into slavery, but only one has been as disgusting. And that's why they decided to sell him, because they had no idea of the depths of depravity that they were selling them into. I'm just telling the truth. So, I only have one shout out today because I promised them that I would shout them out. Christy G, aka Sneezer. Bam, you got it. Stay tuned. We got Mad Karen videos coming. You're gonna love them. Thanks. Peace.